the service economy is rising very, very rapidly. You'll see some, I'm going to share some data here. You see that essentially service economy is actually growing much faster than the goods economy, as companies are figuring out that, they can actually wrap services around their goods. This acceleration rate is pretty dramatic. If you think about it here, you're talking about a 30% gap between the growth in services compared to those in goods, right? That is 30% faster. And it's been growing, compounding over years. Now, this is not only for the developed economy either, right? You would typically think, service economy, only the industrialized nations consume this. Absolutely not. This is like the fascinating part of how the goods economy was overtaken by services economy in even the developing economies. And they are actually today the locomotives of growth in service design and service economy and service consumption that is going on. Now, people would wonder, but what is going on? Why are services so important? Why are services growing so rapidly? And fundamentally, there's been obviously a number of factors that has contributed to this. This could be investments in this area, but the one that really changed the game for this type of offering has been technology. And that more specifically, digital technology. Because typically, services were only available and could be delivered outside the scope of technology in the proximity of a provider and a consumer, right? If I wanted to deliver a certain service, may that be I needed to come to your house and change the punctured tire on your car, for example, where I actually had to be in a proximity of you because I needed to come there and almost physically do that work. What technology really did to the world is it dematerialized all of these, and more specifically, services. So technology has allowed companies essentially to deliver services at a global scale at marginal cost. This has a couple of very insightful impacts on how global economy is developing. First of all, it is winner take all, right? I mean, you increasingly see services developed in one part of the world taking over the entire world, right? So there is a dramatic acceleration of development and delivery of services that can actually be consumed at a global level without any friction. This is true for banking, insurance, utilities, across the board. You see the same type of trends that are happening when it comes to delivering of services. Now, of course, the marginal cost obviously has also reduced the opportunity for companies to build these services. Right? Now, more and more companies from the old economy, AKA the goods economy, are figuring out that not only they have an opportunity, but it's actually exponential in augmenting their goods with services, typically digital technology-oriented services. This is where you see companies investing extensively in IoT, for example, because they're building the platform for digital services to be developed tomorrow. This is where you see companies investing in software and apps that augment the value proposition of a physical good that yesterday they were to deliver to customers. May that be in the B2B space or in the B2C space. And examples of this acceleration are all over the place. When I and Marc were working on our blog post, we actually came across quite a few of them. Some tremendously amusing, to be honest with you, but very, very serious. A great example is toothbrush. Now, I'm sure everyone here on the call, knows toothbrushes and brushing our teeth and flossing and the glass of water, and we all have this thing, right, in our bathrooms. Toothbrushes weren't electric before, and then they became electric a couple of years ago, right? And you used to have electric toothbrushes that you would use in order to brush your teeth. An electric toothbrush on average, depending on the quality and what it does, is somewhere between $30 to $50, right? I mean, you would get different type of quality, but that's the range in which you would get actually a typical electric toothbrush. And then the service economy happened to toothbrushes, and the service revolution took over. And then what we had is this, right? We had the Oral-B IO, and we had the Sonicare from Philips, top of the range. And this doesn't look like a toothbrush. When I look at this picture, I think it's like a SpaceX rocket taking off or something like that, right? Because essentially what really happened is companies, providers of toothbrushes started figuring out that actually they're no longer in the manufacturing and distribution of the physical toothbrush. They're actually in the business of dental hygiene. And as such, they started to develop services around the toothbrush in order to help customers capitalize on their ambition of dental hygiene. It's fascinating because essentially as a consumer, I don't care to buy or use a toothbrush. What I want is to have dental hygiene. That's what I'm really looking for. And part of that was the toothbrush. Part of that was learning how to use it. Part of that was being able to connect to my dentist. And toothbrush companies realize that around the physical good, they can actually build tremendous value proposition for dental hygiene of the end consumers. They are stepping into spaces adjacent to their core offering and augmenting the value proposition to users. And as a result, capturing a very large portion of that value proposition as well. We used to buy an electric toothbrush for $30 to $50. Today, guys, we're happy if we can pay $500. We're happy because otherwise it's $700. Now, this is mind-boggling. And this is where the 10X that I was talking about is coming from. It's how do companies can capitalize on the service opportunity to expand beyond the core proposition that they have and step into adjacent opportunities that they can then dominate, in which they can be the default and capture the value proposition. And that could be done globally. Today, companies like Oral-B or Philips can actually connect you to dentists and dental hygiene services around the toothbrush at a global scale. It's not a local business. And suddenly they're dominating an industry. So we used to pay, we used to pay 30 and 50. Now we're paying 500 and we feel pretty good about it. So my joke was, who's laughing now, right? Because essentially the toothbrushes have taken over how we and are supposed to deliver dental hygiene to ourselves.
Wow, thanks a lot, Moodi. It's a great example. I already saw a few people in the chat as well that they really like this example. It really resonates. Marc, now we know that people spend 500 euro. I mean, I need to start saving up myself, but now we know people start spending 500 euro on toothbrushes. I mean, how do we do it? I guess everyone wants to know the trick, right? How can they start transforming their products and services into something that has that much value?
First of all, I'm afraid of toothbrushes now taking over the world, actually, and laughing while they're doing that. Can you stop sharing, please, so I can start my own slides? Perfect.
Sure. You should be able to take over.
All right, thank you. Before I start with my part on actually what service design is, I just want to put a bit context around that, and we saw a great example. Thanks for sharing that, Moodi, on how you can servitize, how you can capitalize on products as we saw it. But I just want to put context around service design, that you can use it in so many areas of businesses and organizations in general. So we will talk about customer experience and what we already started, but whatever I talk now, you can also apply it on employee experience, thinking about how employees work, how's the work experience, how we can improve it. You can think of healthcare and patient experience, but also the experience of healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, and so on. Think about public services, think about citizen experiences, and so on. It works in public and private, in profit, in non-profit areas. Basically, what we really want to achieve is we want to increase the human experience, basically in any context. What I'm going to talk about can be used for all of these, and basically also what is reflected later on in next, what we're going to talk about later on, is usable there as well. So who am I? Already introduced my books. They're also the covers. The one on the left side is a book I published in 2010 called This is Service Design Thinking, together with Jacob, and then together with Jacob, Marcus, and Adam in 2018, This is Service Design Doing. Along with the book comes a whole method collection, and part of that is now included in next, something we're going to talk about later. On the right-hand side is my company, Smaply, the journey mapping software, also something that will be integrated, but we talk about that at a different occasion. So I'm here today to talk about what a hack is service design. And probably it will be the shortest introduction of service design that I will ever give, because I gave myself 10 minutes for that, so the clock is ticking. Service design is focusing around 4 core activities. And we call these core activities and not stages or phases, because one fundamental thing about any design process is that it is iterative. Iterative means you can start anywhere. You can start with a problem. So the first activity you might want to do is doing research. But you can also start with an idea. You can start with a prototype. And actually, at any moment, you think, what is the next valuable thing to do? So when I now introduce each of these activities, keep in mind that you can mix and match them however it might be useful for your own project. Let's start talking about research. Research, you probably know that we have quantitative tools and we have qualitative tools. And no matter what methods you use, it's never a question of either or, it's always a question and, because we need both sides. We need quantitative methods to monitor certain KPIs over time, to understand, are we increasing, are we decreasing, do we have a problem in some areas? But then we need qualitative research methods to dig deeper and understand the human behavior side of that. And qualitative methods will give us actionable insights. Now, when we talk about services, when we talk about experience, it means we really need to understand humans in context. So what we do is we use a lot of contextual research methods like contextual interviews, where we do the research in the moment when people actually use a service, physical product, a digital product, whatever you're focusing on. We use methods like non-participant observation. The nickname of that is the fly on the wall, because you observe simple behavior without interfering in it. Of course, you need the consent from the folks you're doing the research with, no question about that. But then you actually step out of it and just observe and learn from that. We also have very immersive techniques where we use, for example, participant observation. The nickname of that is shadowing. Even more important to have consent, otherwise it becomes really, really creepy. But that means you actually shadow people throughout a service experience. So step by step, you try to understand how an experience unfolds. So you can use that to understand pain points or needs of people, or how they're actually using a product or a service. We also do work-along, so we never look only at one perspective. We always look at least the customer and the employee side. We try to understand the backstage processes. So how do organizations work to actually create a certain experience? There are way more methods, but I think it's enough to get an idea of it. We collect lots of data, and then we try to summarize these data and take like key summaries out of that. We use different approaches for that. You see a few examples here. It can be jobs to be done or key insights, user stories, depends on your organization, the project, what might be useful. But to get there, from this step of a pile of research data to these key summaries, we usually use visualizations. Because it's one thing to talk about an experience, but it's a real game changer if you visualize an experience with tools like a journey map, a persona, or system maps to make sure that everyone who's involved in this project is on the same page and actually talks about the very same thing. So it can be a journey map like this, where we try to understand 4 different customer groups visualized as 3 different colors here. What are their common pain points? What are the moments we actually should focus on first? What we usually do is, if we look at a product, we identify all the pain points there are, and usually there are loads of them because, frankly, services are broken out there. And then we try to get actionable insights on how to improve it. So basically what we're building is a backlog of pain points or customer needs that we need to focus on and improve. And then we work these off step by step, project by project, to iteratively improve a product or service. Loads of people think that service design or other label we use for their design thinking is just an ideation format. So you hear it often, oh, let's do a design thinking workshop. And what people often mean is like, well, we put some post-its on the wall with ideas that everyone has, and then we agree that none of them is good, but we were creative and done happy. And we all know, excuse my French, that's bullshit. That's not what design is, and that's not what design thinking ever was. If you just do two things, it's research and prototyping, and that's why I think ideation is overrated. Ideas are cheap if you've done your research well, if you included the right people, if you worked in a co-creative, co-design manner and actually included the right people, you will end your research already with a bunch of ideas. But what is underrated and usually underdone in organization is prototyping. So challenging your ideas, testing your ideas, developing these ideas further into a state that is launchable. So when we look at prototyping, we might start again with a journey map, a different one in this case. We call it a future state map, where we visualize how an experience might look like in the future. And once we have that, we identify parts of the experience that we are certain that we can deliver like that, and the parts we are not certain. And then we use methods like a desktop walkthrough, which basically means you enact the new experience using Lego or Playmobil figurines on a desktop. You can also work virtually to do this. And even though it looks very playful, in a short amount of time, you already identify what are the biggest issues with these new ideas. What are the biggest bugs? It's cheap, it's fast, and you still learn a lot. So why don't you start like this? When it's about digital solutions, we might do wireframes, click dummies. So without writing a line of code, already envisioning how the flow might be. We can put it in context. That's a photo from a project in Atlanta on public transport. You see a colleague of mine, Adam, sitting in a bus stop that we've built out of cardboard in just 20 minutes. And what we've done then is a bit of wireframing here. So these are actually digital screens that we just mocked up with paper. We wrote stuff on it. The thing is, you can do contextual prototyping with that. You can put this bus stop out on the street and get immediate feedback from bus drivers, from commuters, and iterate your concept while you're doing this. Now, when we think about implementation, so getting concepts on the road, service design is not new. I mean, services are out there, so someone actually developed it. But what we usually see is that different parts of the organization are responsible for different parts of the service. It's not a consistent experience for people. And that's for people in the context of employee experience. Think about onboarding process and going through assessment centers and so on, like your first year at a company compared with your 10th years, how do you leave? It really depends with whom you're talking, with whom you're interacting, how this experience makes you feel. And same with the customer. You might see advertisements of a product, maybe put out there by a marketing department. You might go to a shop, to the point of sale. You have, again, probably a good experience at the point of sale. Then you take your buying decision, you buy whatever you have an issue, you call technical support, suddenly by a different department, and you think you're suddenly talking to a different company. And that's because we didn't design it consistently. So what is the issue when we try to innovate together? Every discipline, every organization is silo, has its own language and measures success differently through their own set of KPIs. That makes it really, really hard to efficiently work together. If you ask me what service design is, service design offers a common language that we can all use to innovate together efficiently and co-create. So working together, making sure we speak the same language. That's why the tools we use, the methods we use on purpose are not rocket science, but they are there so people can use it. One of our ambitions, and that's the reason why we wrote books about this, why we published a website of our book, the This is Service Design Doing book with 54 free method descriptions on it and so on, and why we use or why we strive for integrations like the one we're doing here with Next is we want to bring service design into the hands of as many people out there as possible, because we know that this can really change the experience to the better. No matter if you do it for a commercial reason or if you do it for any other reason that you want to improve the experience. I would just like to leave you with one thought and with one quote. Talked about the service design process now. We talked about some tools and methods, and I just stress it out again. It's iterative way. You can start anywhere. I want to leave you with this quote from Thorsten Dirks, the former CEO of Telefonica in Germany. We talk a lot about digital transformation right now and so on. But when you digitize a shitty process, all you get is a digital shitty process. So you're just changing the channel then. So what you should be doing in the process of digitization, when you think about how can we add services to a product, how can we put this maybe on another channel, rethink the entire process from a human perspective. And I hope that this collaboration will help you with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marc. That was very inspiring, and I saw some engagement in the chat already, and a couple of questions coming in. We'll get to all of those in the end, but I think it's really great to see how you're approaching design and not seeing it just as a process that you start with and end with, that goes very sequentially. Now, you guys also shared with us that you teamed up. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about why you teamed up and what you tried to, what you tried to deliver to the users.
Moodi, do you want to start?
Absolutely, Marc. Thanks. Really insightful, stuff as well with regards to service design and how we can think about it. It's really looking forward to seeing how people combine the methodologies and know-how with technology to accelerate that in their companies. So very excited to that. But coming back to the partnership and why I personally am so excited about it. Just a second, what Marc was sharing. If a couple of years ago when we started Next, the real ambition of the organization was to provide a design and discovery platform to product teams. And what do I mean by that, right? Just a buzzword of design and discovery. If I just take it out and just focus on plain English, right? What we wanted to do was first help companies and product teams engage with their customers and users. Right. And I think, Marc, you gave tons of examples about how you do that, right? In obviously non-weird ways. May that be shadowing, flying on the wall, contextual interviews. I mean, these are all ways for you to engage very actively with your users and customers. Through this engagement comes gathering in the form of evidence of their needs and aspiration. And the key word here for me is evidence, because it's not what I think your aspiration is. Or it's not what I dreamt of your need is. It's I have facts, evidence, i.e. to refer to that. And finally, using that to build confidence internally in our team that what we are building and delivering is actually meaningful and helpful to our users and customers. Right? That we are putting the right features, the right products, the right capabilities in the hands of our end users. And not just pushing and shipping a bunch of stuff just because we feel it's great or it's cool. So that's why we started the company a couple of years ago. And through the experiences of working with our customers, we came to 3 very critical insights that truly underpin why we fell in love with what Marc and the team are doing and why we value this partnership so much. The first one is that discovery and design is often an afterthought. And what do I mean by that? For years, have companies invested and prioritized making things better. And this essentially is delivery. We have built rituals. We have created tools like Jira, like DevOps. We have created all these kinds of mechanics in order to make sure that we are shipping the right stuff faster, 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 right? Getting stuff out the door. And we've become very good at that, right? Because now we've honed that for almost a decade now. But what we haven't focused on is the second part of the sentence. Not make things better, but make better things. And I think, Marc, you hammered that out with Thorsten's quote by saying, hey, we can't take what we had and just convert it to digital because it would just be as shitty as it was before it was digital. So we need to make better things. And that better things, making better things, goes through that effort of engaging with your users, interviews and shadowing and fly on the wall and prototyping and all that kind of stuff. And without that, we're not going to be able to get out of guesswork. And I would argue, we still are very much in guesswork. In many, many product teams, it's just guesswork. Oh, we think this is cool. We don't have any evidence for it, or we have very little evidence. We don't have any corroboration. We don't have any data backing it up. And not about even raw data. I'm not even talking about interpreted data. We just don't have much. We're just flying blind. But hey, we're so good at shipping, so let's keep shipping. So that was the first insight for us. How can we truly transform that? How could we truly help companies elevate discovery and design to the same proficiency, disciplined execution that you have for development and delivery? And this is not just software. Huh? I wanted to point out, because very often we align this with this is just for software work. Not truly, actually. It doesn't matter if you're building a car, a bike, a service, a good. It's all the same. So that was our first insight. Our second insight was that there is actually quite a bit of data, right? Meaning all these interviews and shadowings, and I mean, wow, it's like a deluge of data. So the activities and the principles that teams apply result in a ton of data. And what we observed is that this data is going all over the place, if at all anywhere, to be honest. Very often it's nowhere. And if it is, it's fragmented across systems and Post-its and OneNote and Word documents and Excel sheets. And it just doesn't create a mechanic for us to bring it together, interpret it in a proper way, corroborate the data, and essentially build that evidence that we need to have confidence in what we are going to ship next. So it's very data intensive, but there's just no system for it. And if you think about it, all the processes and functions in companies over the past decades that got transformed were data intensive and supported by software. If I take one very fun example, sales. CRMs don't replace salespeople, right? CRMs manage the data of the sales function so that salespeople, instead of running around and managing Excel sheets and forgetting meetings and forgetting to send emails and not doing follow-ups, can focus on what they do best, which is the human interactions. And the same applies, I think, to discovery and design, right? Software doesn't replace designers, doesn't replace product managers. It just prevents designers to become project managers, to become Excel monkeys, right? Because that has no value in the process of design and discovery. And the last insight we had was that this whole thing is continuous. And it may sound very obvious when I say this on the call right now. But actually, how often have you heard processes or activities happen where we say, oh yeah, next week, let's do a discovery workshop, and then we never do anything again? It happens all the time. Whereas what fundamentally doing this properly means is this iteration and repeating of the sequence of discovery, design, development, delivery, discovery, design, development, delivery, discovery, design, development, delivery. That is the winning formula. And Marc talked, we call this continuous. Marc talked about it as iterative. Different words, same concept, right? It's understanding where we're coming from, where we're going. And one of the things Marc says that I love is he calls prototyping research of the future. It's essentially these sequences of researching where we're coming from and where we're going and making sure we're getting it right better and better and better. And the really interesting stuff through this is like you're building a knowledge base of what people want. So your data has long-term value. You're building, getting smarter, getting more insightful, more clairvoyant in what you're trying to build. So when we cross these three different insights, as throughout the work that we have done, that's where we truly fell in love with what Marc and the team are talking about in This is Service Design doing, because it underpins exactly the same fundamentals and values. And it from a very different approach, but I hope you heard very much the same messages in Marc's presentation. The iterative process, continuous. I don't know if you picked up that part about the data and the interpreted data on one of the slides that Marc had, but that's essentially all this data coming in and us having to capture it, organize it, figure it out, process it, corroborate it, combine it. So we need to do that work, right? And fundamentally, no guesswork. Enough with guesswork. Because we are wasting so much development cycles. We're wasting so many development hours. We're creating so much friction with end users. Just because we just don't do that upfront work. We need to, in order to become that type of organizations that are removing friction from the world, that are creating better products that make our end users happier, that build offerings that capture the imagination of our customers. That's what we want to strive for. And that is why when we came across and started talking with Marc and the team, we're like, wow, this is amazingly aligned. But of course, you also see that we come from this from very different angles. On one side, it's a question of principles and methodologies that you can use. And on the other side is what comes out of the application of that principle and methodology, which is then what Next is really focused on. Managing that data, gathering it, helping you connect it, analyze it, articulate it, interpret it, all the mechanics and features required to actually get it together. And that alignment, obviously, is what, inspires us every single day. So that not only can we put this in the hands of the designers, but how can we, through the designers in companies, help the rest of the organization also start designing? So how can we bring design beyond the community of practitioners to all the other people who can be and should be active participants in the creation of value through design and discovery? Our vision is this. I mean, we truly believe that a proper, efficient delivery can only happen through proper design and discovery. And if we help organizations embed this into this iterative process and that sequence that I was talking about, right, of discover, design, develop, deliver, discover, design, develop, deliver. And I'm not saying that this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh? It could be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's just these are practices that need to be embedded in organizations so that we can actually make amazing, amazing offerings for our customers.
Nice, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Moodi. And Marc, you as well. I think we have quite a few questions that came in actually. So maybe we can take some time to go through them and see who's best fit to answer them. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Great. So let me open the chat here because we have a few in the chat. Okay, so we have one question from Martin. So where do you see the biggest difference in service design activities for creating innovation where you get unique for the users versus improving services for new expectations from users? And also that in combination with changed environments and new behaviors that people might get.
It's a question, should we just improve what we have, or should we actually think in the future and build something new that is fit for the future then? And the answer for that is it will be always a trade-off, because you need to do both. You need to improve what you have, because that's usually where your revenue streams come from, or what your organization is doing. And frankly, organizations usually don't put enough efforts on improving what we have. And they build up both a tech debt and what we call an experience debt, where at some point software becomes too clunky or services becomes too complex because we kept on adding stuff over time and so on, and no one actually took the time to improve the experience. While at the same time, we also need to envision, okay, what comes next? What comes after this version? What is the next iteration of it? So think in terms of tracks, and you always need, because we just have limited budget, time and money and people, we need to trade off between them. So you need to work on, okay, what are the pain points right now? What are the needs right now? And keep on improving your existing stuff, while at the same time, you need to start envisioning the future and build the next iteration of whatever your product or service is.
It's one thing, Marc,
go ahead.
If I could add, it's really fascinating because, this idea that you also pointed out, which is be research first. Meaning it's actually very difficult, I have found, to decide, am I working on something that is an improvement, or am I something that is completely transformational? Until I actually find out what the problem is. Because if the problem is one that requires incremental, then we do incremental. If the problem is something that requires transformational, then we do transformational. And somehow companies, I often find that they have to preset. Before we do anything, we decide that we're going to build a moonshot. I mean, and I just struggle to understand how that thinking really operates, because, you know, there's just no basis for why should we build a moonshot. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a great one. So do you have any, so I mean, I'm from a customer success perspective, I'm working with customers every day, and, you know, they have certain things set up in their organization. So for example, some have separate teams that work on H2, H3 innovations, where others work on H1 innovations. The separation, how do you see that in the context of what you just mentioned? Should you bring them together?
I mean, yes, the different horizons and so on. It's something to look at, but what are the boundaries of these horizons? Is it time? And that is like the classic, the traditional model, like 1 year ahead, 3 years ahead, 10 years ahead, what have you. Is it like technology leaps, like when is the next big technology step ahead, and what does it allow us to do with that? Things like if quantum computing becomes a thing we all have access to at some point, what can we do with that? So it's, yes, but it's always, for me, if I look at radical innovation, any real radical innovation had a process, a long process ahead of incremental evolutionary innovation. If we have a team that's only focusing at the radical stuff, I think it's not a good fit, because we should mix things. Because the moment when, after loads of steps of evolutionary innovation, at some moment we have the step when it actually clicks and says, okay, maybe that's the thing we need to do. So to leave people in the right headspace and get them as close to their users, their customers as possible, I wouldn't work in fixed teams, but I would mix teams. But the thinking in general, like on the one hand, thinking far ahead, on the other hand, what can we do right now, is a good one. And perhaps we can combine it with a question Tony just posted, because I think it fits really well here. Sorry for my monologue right now.
No, of course.
Tony asked, like, sometimes I have the feeling organizations now try to cover bad product experience with additional services, but it's no feedback to the product. So I would like to quote a very traditional old model here. That's a Kano model. It comes from 1980. It's nothing new, but a Kano model looks at any product or service, and you can like atomize it and think about all the little features it has. And then you think about basic performance and excitement factors. And there's one thing about this model that's really important, because you can never make up missing basic factors or badly implementing basic factors with new excitement factors. Like if you want to hear an example for that, think about a hotel room. A basic factor would be, it needs to be dry. It needs, like, you need to have a room that's working, heating and so on. Performance might be a bad can be non-existent or shitty, or it can be really, really good. And then you have excitement factors, like you have a hot tub or what have you. But can a hot tub make up for a missing roof and no heating? Well, it will be hard, right? Or for a bed missing in your room. So we need to fix the basics first. And that is something organizations tend to forget. That's why I also mentioned the different tracks. We cannot afford to build up an experience depth. We constantly need to work on that.
It's a great example. So there were actually a few other comments of Tony. Maybe those were not necessarily questions, but there is one that I just wanted to pick out. So Tony mentioned, to convince our management, we need to invest more in tools. And basically he says we gave insights a price tag, which I think is a very, very interesting statement. He said this helped to make the necessity of insight collection and sharing more visible. But do you maybe have any thoughts or recommendations on how you can convince management from that when you start out?
Should I again?
Please.
I'm prepared. All right. Love that. And love the notion from Tony to add price tags to insights. I think what works really well in my experience is to give price tags for pain points. How much does a pain point cost us? How much does an unfulfilled needs cost us? So what are the opportunity costs of that? And there are simple ways to calculate that, at least a rough estimation that is so plausible that it's hard to argue against that. If you talk about financial values there and say, hey, we have these top 10 pain points and they cost us X amount per month, it's really hard to argue against that you shouldn't invest a budget of Y to fix that, especially if Y is less than X.
I think that's a great point, Mark. I think the other thing that is really fascinating is companies somehow have equated the work around service design and so on to the wow factor of things, right? Meaning we're not trying to price pain points. We're trying to, price, not the painkillers, essentially, with the vitamins, right? And so people get excited about new things, funky things, whereas, you have a leaking bucket in the back and, nothing is really moving forward. And I think that is where, I found, that organizations struggle with with dreams and opinions versus facts and evidence. Right. And I think, we're somehow service design has gone to the dreamer world, whereas it's actually something very practical with very tangible impact right now in the business. And we need to kind of bring it back. Right. It's not for the, the guys with the long hair and the ripped jeans and the vegan sneakers. It's for all of us in our function to do that on a daily basis so that we can actually level up the products and offerings that we put in the hands of the users. Sometimes I always joke around by saying, hey, my job is to take the sexy out of design. And some people like it, some people hate it, but I would really aspire for the market to be able to do that.
If I put that in other words, yes, we need to commoditize it. We make, exactly. and that's what I mean with bringing it into the hands of as many people as possible. And that is true within an organization, but also beyond organizations in general. The more people have access to this way of working, I think the better it is on a large scale for our society, because we see more and more innovation in different areas then. And that's why our mission is to bring service design into as many hands as possible. And I think this is just one way to do it.
Cool. So there is also a couple more questions in the Q&A, and I wanted to pick out a few from those as well. And something I actually see a lot too. So this person says, in my company, people think of design as a workshop. And I think, Mark, in your talk, you actually touched upon it already. And you mentioned that ideation is overrated. But they say, well, they do things like design sprints, for example. How does this relate to making design continuous and not make it workshop based only?
Well, it's a wrong understanding of what design actually is. And yeah, there's some terms, some labels that got really burned through there, like design thinking. When people hear design thinking, many people think it's a workshop format where you put post-its on the wall. And we know, yeah, it might be fun during the workshop, but it's not really useful afterwards. There's so many memes about that, like with post-it on the wall, and then you have the different buckets, like, okay, bad idea, not going to work, and so on. Like, okay, we were creative, yay, done. I could tell loads of stories, but I heard things about, yes, we practice design thinking every Thursday, or we do it twice a week, or let's do a service design workshop. And that is not the idea of it. The idea of it that it is continuous improvement. And if you want to bring in the topic of sprints in there are two different kinds of sprints. There's a design sprint, as Google sprints and Jay Knapp pushes it, where you basically squeeze a whole design process in 1 week, or 3 days, or a day, or what have you. And that's okay as a starting point, maybe to get used to it. But actually, that is not the way of working. It's not that you're done and then you can deliver it, because we need more time for that. There's a second way to see sprints, and that is organizing design in sprints, thinking about research sprints, prototyping sprints, implementation sprints, and so on. So you can actually align your processes with other processes in your organization. If you're working in software development, like this, design and software development just fits perfectly together if you work in a similar sprint structure. So how do you get around it that people see design only as a workshop format? Show them the work you do outside of workshops. I have a sticker on my laptop from our company, which says service design, or 95% of service design is not a workshop. Because it's such this thing that people think it's just a workshop format. No, it's research and it's prototyping. These are the main aspects of it. And yes, there are workshops part of it, but think about, when do you involve people into your work? Show them the work you've done, you're doing within research, when you do your interviews, when you do your home visits, when you co-create, and involve them in prototyping, and not only to the workshops.
Great. So we have a few more questions, but maybe we can just pick out one more, and then we have a simple one in the end. There's someone saying design is very much human-driven. I mean, I guess we would all agree to that. But they also say software won't do interviews for me, right? So the question really is, what is the role of software in all of this, and when does software come in, and where does it end? Maybe actually a question to both of you. How would you describe that?
Moodi, do you want to start?
Sure. So, I mean, I would really go back to my example of the CRM there, right? I mean, CRMs don't replace salespeople, right? They only make salespeople better because they eliminate the mundane activities and work that a salesperson needs to do in order to focus on interacting with a prospect or an opportunity that they're working. And I think the same applies here to the concept of discovery and design. What software can do is assist the designers, assist the product teams, assist these people in having a unified place for all of their data, giving them the tools and features they need to process raw data and interpret it into more valuable stuff. Give them the capabilities, even in machine learning or AI, to corroborate data. Once I've done anything more than 5 or 10 interviews, it's very difficult for me to remember who said what, where, all that kind of stuff. And that's where technology can truly become a human assistant fundamentally in this process. So I really think of software as your design assistant. The team, unlimited scalable team that you have to keep everything together while you are focusing on those customer interactions and engagements that make the difference between shipping shitty products and shipping amazingly insightful, delightful products.
I agree. And then with our company, Smaply, we offer a journey mapping software. Now think about how people do journey maps without the software. They either use tools like Microsoft Excel or PowerPoint, things that are accessible. Everyone in an organization can essentially work with that, but it looks shitty. Or they use design software, things like Figma or InDesign and so on. The results look great, but who in the organization can actually work with that? It's not accessible. So the idea with Smaply was that we actually combine both, make it accessible, but still offer a guided way to create structured journey maps that look great, and that actually people can access it, go back and change it, make copies of that, and so on. So yes, again, someone needs to create a journey map, and that's probably the role of a designer, an innovator, whoever has a role of working with journey maps there. But then is dedicated software just helps you to accelerate your work and makes it more accessible. And I think that's what we see just on different levels.
Great. So one last question then maybe, and this could be a simple one. Someone asked, how do I get started? Where do I sign up for Next? What can I do?
Well, I mean, the offering between this is service design doing, including actually Smaply as well, and Next has all been, is accessible at nextapp.co. So if you go to nextapp.co and you click the try for free button, essentially you will be onboarded onto the journey of going, of consuming all the content, the principles, the methods, but of course all the automation, software, and the data management that we also talked about. So I invite you guys to get started. It's free of charge. You guys can use it for free forever, as long as you use it under a certain amount of bandwidth. And if you are an enterprise and want to go beyond that, feel free to reach out to sales, and we'll be happy to engage and converse with you further.
Given that we're at the end, we only have 3 more minutes left. I wanted to just quickly summarize in 3 bullet points. First of all, you mentioned discovery is design, and I think that's a very, very interesting key takeaway, that it's both research and prototyping. And one thing, Marc, that you mentioned earlier is prototyping is research of the future. Research is research of the past. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I thought this would be, a great quote that I just wanted to put in there. The other one is discovery is continuous, and design in that, for that matter, is also continuous. It's not workshops. It's not just a single project and we stop. It's something that becomes a habit, and you go through cycles, as Moodi mentioned, of discovery and delivery. And it seems that every company should go out and identify their toothbrush and 10x their products, because who doesn't want to charge 500 euro for a toothbrush? It's amazing. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. As we mentioned, the recording will be shared with you. I hope you enjoyed the webinar today. And of course, we also hope to see you at a future event. Soon we'll have another webinar together, and we'll keep on pushing out content and new webinars that you can join. Yeah, and we look forward to taking the next steps with you and seeing you using this service design, doing content and using Next.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.